Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. Let's make some silence first. So once again, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Satsang. So today I bring a topic, maybe not very known topic, but an important topic, nevertheless, a very important topic. And I'm going to call it the boomerang effect. Spiritual practices, they are a means to an end. They are there to potentialize, let's call it for now, transformation. It's a deficient word, but it's the best one I can find now. So they potentialize, they direct you into that direction, but they are not a guarantee. To rise above the sea of illusion, it's difficult. And the biggest difficulty is because, well, there's no understanding about the complexities of it. And you have to, more or less, until you have something else better, to rely on your mechanisms of perception to derive conclusions and to make the best out of it. And that is to work with instruments of illusion to transcend illusion. Usually doesn't work very well. If certain steps are not given. But above all, the important part is to understand that spiritual practices, guidance, they are not synonymous with 100% success. It is your will, your desire for liberation, coupled with embracing the guidance and the spiritual practices that are given by guidance or even prior to guidance, and your reflections about it, your reasonings, trying to understand what does these practices want from me? Where are they pointing to? And doing your level best to bring these teachings, because spiritual teachings, they are circumstances, or they create circumstances. It's more or less the same. And it is in these circumstances that you learn that whatever needs to be transformed gets transformed. We can look at enlightenment from the point of view of the blind. And that is the ultimate state, the highest state, or not even a state, whatever. But it's something that the character sees as even higher than whatever human power there is available. And this is what's possible from this illusory perception. Because enlightenment is the ultimate simplicity. And the delusion character is the, depending on where he is, okay? The character that we can say, oh, that is a bad person. Of course, that is subjective, but someone who delights um, in wrongful deeds, in suffering and pain of others, and this is a character that is more or less in the end scale of this complexity. It is the most complex by far. Someone who delights in the good, in simplicity, in all these values that are spiritual values. It is complex, but not as complex, and it is easy. It is closest to simplicity. So spiritual teachings, they challenge the beliefs behind these states of complexity to direct them to more and more simple, more and more simplicity, more and more simplicity. And this is challenging because it's not about adopting behaviors, it's about bringing this transformation. So if you look at the teachings and if you look at the spiritual practices, like they are in an end to themselves, that they will do everything that needs to be done, you're not getting the point. Spiritual practices, let's call it meditation, will potentialize whatever you are doing. So it's better for you to be on the right track, to understand the nature, the core of spiritual teachings. And as you embrace one after the other, you will find yourself in circumstances that, if well used, and it can be apparent outer circumstances or apparent inner circumstances, if you can use them as they present themselves, aligning yourself always in the face of whatever choice there is to the highest, then this transformation starts to occur from the more complex to simplicity. For this to be possible, there's a lot of things, because whatever point of complexity that you find yourself, this is creating fruits. Fruits have to be taken. So even to be able to move from complexity towards simplicity, bills have to be paid. It is a natural part of the process. And it's very important, it is crucial that you understand that your desire for liberation needs your full dedication. Even because something that is not discussed, there are many, many, many interests in that you don't succeed. This dream goes beyond what the physical senses can perceive. And as there are many forces helping, taking care of, like many of you perceive, there's also many, many forces, and even these days, I can say that they are even bigger, to, how do you say this, to guarantee that you don't. The majority of you don't see this, of course. You can see it, but you don't know what you're seeing. I will explain. These forces, they don't declare themselves the way that seekers expect. In the majority of times, it is through seduction. So there are different types of synchronicities. I don't like them, and I urge seekers of truth not to be connected to this. But let's, for an exercise, Let's do this exercise a little bit. There are synchronicities that you see, especially in the beginning, that take you closer to your quest for truth. And as you're getting involved, there's other synchronicities that are happening to push you away. And this can be more visible, less visible, and it will reveal itself in certain circumstances in a more intense way, and in other circumstances, just if it can manage it with seduction, seducing you towards a different direction, or even if you think that it's in the same direction, but just removing the possibility of any spiritual fire, you will not feel aggression from these things. You'll feel like you even confuse yourself. Oh, there's blessings coming in my way. Of course, if you still have worldly desires, but that's not really a blessing. And there are moments where this can come in a very threatening, dangerous way. Everything has a purpose. So, as it is painted as just, well, like a hobby thing, I do my life and then I practice a little bit of meditation and this and that. Well, you cannot, it's not possible to live the scope of it, the full scope of it. But if the desire for liberation is there, then it is in your best interest to focus as hard as you can. In a sense, to understand what underlies these spiritual teachings. What are their invitations? And they are manifold. Of course, that transformation that I was talking about, it is one of the big ones. Because you cannot go from extreme complexity to extreme simplicity. These are just words, of course, but it's impossible. You would dissociate, whatever that means. But for this to happen, dead spiritual practices are not enough. And what is a dead spiritual practice? Is a practice that it's happening on automatic, or if you're doing it not in an automatic way, you're putting some focus there, concentration, but at the same time, you're still entertaining those things which are contrary to that. Some you may not know that they are, others you will. But if you're focusing on taking care of that what you see now, your eyes, your vision will improve later. It progresses in this way. If you're not taking care of what you see now, your focus cannot increase, so you will not be able to see the rest. And why would you see the rest if you're not taking care of what you see now? So sometimes it's just greed, because it is the highest of the highest. Other times there is the calling, but the worldly part is very strong yet. The reason why you need to take this seriously, it's because everything feeds from your meditation. Even the bad parts, whatever that means. Let's call it the contrary parts, the opposite parts, the parts of you that take you in the opposite direction. It can feed from this energy, this strength that comes from meditation. It's a potentializer. So it's in your best interest that you are that the water is coming to the right mouth. And this you can do only by embracing the teachings as they come with utmost sincerity and doing your level best to recognize the essence of it. What are the invitations and the challenges that come in your way? Where are they pointing to? So that you can prepare yourself and so that the water goes into the right mouth. Because in the beginning, there's always imbalance. No matter how good you think you are, how nice person, this and that, egotism is big, intense. And wherever you find yourself, that is your grossest aspect. So to move towards simplicity, that complexity has to stay behind. And this is by embracing, exposing yourself, diving into the meaning of these teachings, knowing the highest standards, the highest spiritual standards, and trying to abide by them. And you will see the importance of this in accordance to the conflict it arises in you when you are facing, which is constantly, these decisions. Some of them you see them as important, other you don't, but they are still decisions and they still impair whatever comes next. Because if you're embracing your level best, your spiritual practices, and at the same time, you're still indulging into worldly things, it doesn't matter if it's just small ones, it doesn't matter. Then you can experience what I'm deeming as the boomerang effect. You go forward, 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 and then a violent strength will pull you back again to the same place or even into a more complex state. And in these moments, because these movements are prepared, they are worked, and they are effective in nature. And in these moments, whatever you have done of good can help you, will try to help you. But depending on what you did towards the other side, it may not be enough. It's like putting tension into a rubber string. I don't have a better name for it. And you're pulling and pulling, you're exerting more pressure here. It's accumulating, and the more you can pull, as you let go, the faster it will travel to its point of origin. Because if there wasn't transformation, that's what will happen. So the quest for liberation has many, many different teachings involved depending on who you are. Not who you are, but depending on the characteristics involved. And sometimes this needs to be lived. Because everything is a learning process. And if there's a need for it, it has to be lived so that you can realign. But these are troublesome periods. Very troublesome. And it usually, what underlies this is not taking things serious enough. And then there's other aspects. There's certain exceptions that the motivations were completely out of place and were not corrected. Everything is correctable, of course, but only if you really want to. And in these moments, if you have lost everything, the ability to do spiritual practices, even the desire for it, if you have reached this intense point, only devotion can help you. Increasing devotion to the highest peaks possible. But if you haven't worked on that, then there's nothing to hold you. And eventually you will have to wait for another cycle, for the thirst to come up, so these structures get recovered, the thirst to come up intensely, and whatever you went to, whatever that has taken to, it has to exhaust itself also, so that the new path can open. And this, of course, has a lot of time involved. It always has. And this is something which is observable in many spheres of life, not only in spirituality. Those who work with others have experienced this as they are dedicating to them, trying to help them. They will move, and depending on the intensity, they can move fast. But when you let go, you observe them going back to where they were. But at this level, I'm talking about powerful forces, very powerful forces. Because in the previous example, there's no conscious about these things. So it's like personal will is completely identified with the manifesting desires, needs, feelings of the body-mind complex. At this level, supposedly, when you're at this level that I'm talking about, there's already at least some distinction between them, if you have done any work. So the desires, needs, moods, feelings that arise in the body-mind complex, they are not exactly my own. There can be some confusion in there still, but there's a little part that already knows that it's not exactly the same thing. And if you're not seeing these forces at play, the ones that interfere, the ones that help, and these at the personal level, well, you're probably just in the seduction part, accepting seductions. Doesn't matter how they present themselves, how they come, but nothing much is happening. Because if you're walking seriously, eventually you will have to face these things. And the spiritual path has many, many different cycles. With different tests on its own. And either you are moving towards simplicity, let's use this terminology because, well, I've used it already. Then you're moving towards complexity. Nobody stops in the middle. So people sometimes look at challenges that come in the spiritual path. The biggest one is detachment from whatever it is. And then people have arguments about the levels of detachment, the importance of detachment, like it was just circumstantial. And they say, oh, for the wise man, there's nothing to detach and there's nothing to attach to. Of course, that's for the wise man. And it doesn't need to be a liberated man, just a wise man. But that's for a wise man. And some say, oh, you have to do this. And the other says, oh, you don't, you just need to do this. Or you don't have to do that. But this is wrong because neither of these circumstances are outer circumstances. They are challenges that are being presented to you. If they are being presented to you, it's your need. And if it's your need, you cannot go around it. It's not even a question because if it's coming, it's important. So if you go around it, you're just fooling yourself and not doing things in your best interest. And then people measure things. So I've been presented with this certain challenge and my life gotten worse than it was before. So where is the spirituality in it? Well, that is trying to evaluate a spiritual path through a worldly perspective. But they are opposite. So in a worldly perspective, there's the need to balance these both aspects, to find the middle grounds there in this scale of complexity, simplicity. Not too much complex that it cannot work in a society, and not too simple that it can be crushed by society, taken advantage of, or whatever. And this is a worldly vision, a worldly perspective. So it is the functionality into the laws of worldly life that is the aim of everything that comes as self-help and all those. It has nothing to do with spirituality. You can look at the stories of the saints. Well, in terms of worldly values, majority of them were a complete disaster in a worldly analysis. So the fruits of spiritual practice, they cannot be recognized by a worldly mind, by a worldly perspective, because the fruits of any spiritual practice is more simplicity at all levels. And depending on the intensity of your calling, depending on the intensity of your spiritual practices, of your thirst, things can become really bad until they can improve. improve in the sense of the fruits of your spiritual work start coming, because a lot of complexities need to be worked. And the fruits of those complexities, the karmas associated with them, need to be worked. And if the good fruits come immediately, the bad parts will also have it and get strengthened. And this is an intelligent process. It's like the one who is making a garden. Before he gives the nourishment to the land, to the plants, he removes the weeds so that the nourishment doesn't go to the weeds, because nourishment is nourishment. And by being constantly there removing the weeds, he makes sure that the majority of the nourishment goes to the good plants. There will still be some weeds in the middle, and the seeds are there, that more will come. So he has to continuously do this, because the good plants, the good seeds, they are few, they are not many. They don't need to be many also, because if they are important to you, you will take care of them. But the weeds, they are many, 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 many. It seems endless weeds. Because it is designed to appear impossible, but it isn't. As you are able to shift the intensity, not even that inexhaustible ocean of weeds, seeds of weeds, will be an obstacle. So the devotion plays a big part always. And in this case, it is probably what can help you undergo this stage, if you arrive here, of course. Nothing else probably will be a help. Of course, each case is each case. So my advice is, increase your level of devotion. Don't let it die in any circumstance whatsoever. Because in the darkest moments, that will be the only guiding light. And sometimes you will probably have no strength to go on, but just keep looking at the light. And use that moment to reflect. What have I done that I shouldn't have? What should I have done that I didn't? Use this moment to increase the seriousness of your commitment. Because moments that seem helpless, they are there to test your resolve and to see what values are you still embracing. Because if in that moment you can embrace different values, you can still move higher. Because it's not over until it's over. And sometimes everything seems lost until the final moment. And that final moment you succeeded, and then paf! So nothing means nothing until it does. So remember this. Spiritual teachings, they are circumstances. As you embrace them, circumstances will follow. They are invitations for you to understand by the way that this impacts you. What do you need to develop? What do you need to sustain? It's like if I have a huge solid piece of ice and I want it to melt into water, and if I take it outside to the hot sun and leave it for 10 seconds, then I put it in the freezer again, nothing much will change. I have to leave it there. For what time? Until it melts everything. And what will that time be? You don't know. Probably there's some mathematical calculations for that, but that's not in our league. So, and in this case, this rock of ice is something outside of you. But these things, they are not inside, they are what you call yourself. Until these transformations occur, those circumstances need to be maintained, embraced, explored. It's like, okay, so I have to stay here, locked up in these four walls. So what do I need to learn? Probably I need to learn to practice patience, acceptance, to align myself with this force that it is forcing me here. A lot of things you can use your mind to try to understand and to see the resistance you have towards that. That means the difficulties you have towards that new situation. So, okay, so these difficulties, they are what I need to learn also. And you start focusing on that instead of breaking loose from those four walls or using a little time to just go and get some air. You start learning with these circumstances and doing more. Okay, so I can be in these four walls, trapped, cannot go around here, but I can run inside these four walls. I can invent some games here. I can be creative and try to work strategies to occupy my time. Or I can accept this limitation and increase it. Okay, so I don't move beyond these four walls. So stillness is needed. It is being brought to me. So I embrace it. And instead of walking around, I start doing things very slowly and taking long moments of absolute stillness. This is going beyond what is being forced in a sense. It is taking the best out of the teaching. When does it end? When the new set of circumstances are brought to me, aligned with that process of liberation, with those higher goals, of course. And in the end, the real problem with these things is not, oh, there's someone judging this and punishing and this and that. There is someone judging this, yes, and that is your consciousness. And as time flows from your hands, your consciousness can be brutal. Some of you know this, others will have to discover it yet. But as time is still there, it's not lost, so there's hope for it. But as this time is passing, this consciousness will be more and more demanding, and sometimes very difficult to take. And eventually, if you are embracing intensity, you are embracing and you have the power to intensify your spiritual practices, to go to break the limits of nothing compared to any other human being, to exceed yourself into the highest. But you're doing this just for greed in itself, not exposing yourself fully to those circumstances, because if the greed is very high and you lack the basic conditions of goodness to do the path, but you have a very strong, powerful will, you can walk the path, but eventually it'll explode in your face. And even that explosion is still opportunity. But at this level, this is a very small percentage. This more complex side will be embraced as a salvation of this character. And devotion, well, if it wasn't there, it will not come at this moment also. If the devotion was just greed motivated, oh, I'm developing devotion because of what I want to receive, then it will not be there. It will not hold you, will not feel its sustenance, its presence. So the presence of these minimum conditions we cannot say that they are limiting. You're the limit. Nothing is a limitation in itself unless you embrace it as such. Everything is possible. But without that work of perceiving, what is the meaning of this teaching? Where is it pointing me? What do I need to learn in these circumstances? If you're not looking into this direction, and how can I enhance them? Then it's complicated. You too, dear. But if devotion is there, embrace it with all your heart, with all your soul. Hold on in the presence of the storm, because that's what you need to do. Just hold on. Because when the storm reaches that peak, that intensity, nothing else is possible. If it's something else is possible, it hasn't reached its full intensity. But at this level that I'm talking about, when it reaches this intensity, only that devotion can help you. Because sometimes seekers are reckless, depending on what they know or don't know, but in the presence of what they know, they can be reckless. And in some situations, it may not make so much of a difference, but in other situations, it may be fatal or at least brutal. So in the extreme of the extremes, if you find that devotion is present, there's still a chance. And hold on to it, just hold on to it. It's like the middle of a storm in the ocean. And you just hold on to something and you remain there until it's over. Good. But remember, you see, if someone excuse me, if someone enters that storm, it means that many things were not understood, taken real seriously. Because one thing is the storms that come, they come all the time for the seekers of truth, of course. But one thing is the storm that you are facing and your strength is there. But this kind of storm that I'm talking about, you're facing it, but the strength is not there. So as people are in the worldly life and they meet some of these storms, they reflect a lot on many things and what's the real importance of things. And in that moment, they think of all that they would do differently if they had the chance. So surviving these storms is about having the chance, but also surviving these storms, it is you revealing if a chance makes sense. It's like your message to this spiritual dimension. And it's like during the storm, either you will convince this dimension or you won't. Because life is all about that. And if you're not being able to walk directly, then worldly life will teach you by the emptiness of it, the suffering, the lack of purpose, meaning, coupled with the calling, it will redirect you again, but lots of time wasted. So as you go through this, and if you survive, you need to honor that. It's very important. Either you belong to this world or you don't. If you still belong to this world, transcendence is not possible. And taking both at the same time, doing both at the same time is doing none. Or just one, but badly. Not badly, because it's not about the conditions of life. That's irrelevant. It's about limited perception of who you are, no matter what the circumstances are, or knowing who you really are. This is what it's all about. Because the rest, good or bad, these are just relative terms in the minds of the ignorant. According to circumstances, one thing can be good to one person, it can be bad to the other person. And for those who have the calling, even there, even the life of the body-mind complex serves a different purpose. Of course, it went into the same school, learned the same vices, mastered the same complexities. But to walk the path towards liberation, it will have to empty all these learnings so that it becomes suitable for this path. And this path is not circumstantial. Circumstances make it possible, but it is the transformation that occurs in the presence of circumstances that we called making the path. So if there's transformations in that alignment happening, the path is being walked. If they are not, the path is not being walked, even if a lot of decisions have been made in that direction. Is it real or it isn't? So that big question that is usually made in these moments, during these moments, these periods, is why am I still here in this place again after all I've done? And the answer is because you still haven't learned what you needed to learn. So sometimes people think that, oh, so life, the challenge is to do this, and I do it, and it's done. But that's not the case. Doing that triggers certain circumstances, certain things for you to grow in that direction. So you need to take up that challenge, understand what it means, and work intensely into that direction. It's like walking up stairs. The impulse and the strength you use in the first one will help you reach the second one. To reach the third one, you will have to use the same amount of strength, and sometimes even more because your muscles get more tired until you reach the top. May your devotion be strong enough to support you, to hold you, to nourish you, or even to propel you. Okay. So for today, that's it. Next satsang will be probably Saturday, 9:30 in the morning, Brazilian time, UTC -3. Until then, make the best use of your time. Make it real for you. That's